coming in with a project management kind of specialization. Then I've got Amos Nungu. Amos is from Tanzania. He's the current CEO of the Research and Education Network of Tanzania, TANET. So I've got a 3-person act, and this should be very interesting to see how it goes. Please go ahead. We are missing Amos. Is he coming?
Hello. So, well, as you know, I'm here to talk about iMENTORS. iMENTORS is a project that started 2.5 years ago. The idea was, well, we were thinking at the moment, brainstorming about possible ideas on how to improve the coordination between actors, and that was the main objective that we have, because we've often implemented many different ICT 4D projects in Africa, and often we were, often we were confronted with the realization that once we were implementing it, we were realizing that we were actually competing against many different people on the ground who were already doing the same thing. So that was, for us, a bit of an issue. So we come up with this idea of basically, well, doing a database, because the problem is that there was a lot of money that is being wasted, invested on larger projects. You have a lot of coordination between the big entities that are doing it. People are quite effective when there's an enormous amount of money at once being spent on consulting with other partners, and even across donors. I think there's a consensus when there's large infrastructure projects being built. But like for many other smaller research projects or infrastructure projects, the problem is that there are a lot of double ineffective investments, which is basically there because there's a lack of knowledge on what's on the ground. And so as a problem, you have as a consequence, a lack of synergy. So the idea was that we were discussing with the institution at the moment, with a lot of institutions and a lot of scientists. And so if you have no visibility, the problem is that there is no database on the ground. There's nothing to provide us information. Every information is scattered. So there is no dialogue because nobody knows what others are doing. And so there is no collaboration. So the project, these are the major objectives of the project, is, well, to enhance the coherence and effectiveness of international actors that are involved in the development of e-infrastructure projects by building what we refer to in a very, nice way as a one-stop shop platform to display all the e-infrastructure projects, the investments that have occurred in that area of the past 5 years, a social hub so that people could connect with others, not just with the project itself, but with people who are actually behind it, and to provide to facilitate stakeholder interaction so that they would actually plan future synergies. We have developed a few features on the platform that can actually be used for that purpose. And as such, this would be some sort of a decision support system which would actually provide information evaluate proposals ahead even of their development by actually implementing a very sophisticated yet very simple to use evaluation system. So there are a few challenges when we started, obviously, because this is where we started from. And one of them was that e-infrastructures on their own are actually very complicated. I mean, I'm not even a scientist. For me, this was a nightmare, I have to tell you. 2 years and a half ago, being plunged into this field with all these different classifications and all these different, in all these different environments, it was actually quite challenging to be able to make much sense of what was going on. Another thing is that we had no way to really trace funding apart from 1 or 2 databases, and basically the classification, just purely the classification of how to classify e-infrastructure in its own was actually very, very, very challenging too. There have been many attempts at evaluating, providing, let's say, benchmarking and so on. But normally these are classified usually by type, and at best by by field, so let's say natural science, but it doesn't explain much, and it doesn't solve the problem of how to trace funding, because a lot of institutions, belong to the same organism. So for us, it was complicated to basically just be able to assess this. So without all of this information, without this information being systematically published by either donor providers or by the recipient, it was complicated. And then we actually started talking with the scientists themselves, because we were part of the conferences and so on, and we were basically trying to understand what they need. Because, okay, it's one thing to trace funding, but how can we actually also help this project go beyond and help the scientific community, because this is why we're doing it. And we quickly understood that in Africa, the problem was that nobody really talked to each other. I mean, for us, it was very simple because, we were part of these conferences where people are supposed to talk, but a lot of scientists have no idea what other scientists in neighboring countries are doing. And that's actually a major problem for them, because they don't know what resources are available. Even if they are available, they don't know how to access them. And often they don't know what other type of research is actually happening in the surrounding periphery. So as soon as we realized that, we were actually trying to put them together also for scientific purposes. And so today we have iMENTORS. So iMENTORS looks a bit like that. I am going to let the floor to John, who's been in charge of all the data collection, which is quite tedious, I have to say. And he'll basically explain what you can find on there for the moment.
So based on what Luis has described, we had problems on where to start or where to end. There was no single database. So iMENTORS is now part of the future solution to that problem. If you log on to, or if you go into iMENTORS webpage, you can find the information we have gathered in two forms. There is the interactive map, which is what I've used on the display on this slide, but you can also generate the lists of different actors or resources, as Simon Taylor called it earlier on, and you can see individual players, whether it's projects, organizations, or donors. What we have to date, based on the problems that Luis have outlined, we have managed to enlist and record into the system over 280 research infrastructures. We have over 160 physical networks. We have also managed to record over 3,300 organizations that have different interests in e-infrastructures in Africa. We have also recorded over 400 projects that have been funded in the area of e-infrastructures in Africa over the past 5 years. Now, what I would also highlight is, after collecting all the information from different sources, we had to come up with a way of categorizing them and classifying them. And one of the key things was to differentiate between what a project is and an e-infrastructure is. And what we've ended up with is an attempt to distinguish between e-infrastructures and projects. And our classification is not the correct one or the best one, but it provides a platform for people in this meeting and going forward for discussions exactly on what we mean when we use these terminologies, because we use them interchangeably. We have, for example, looked at NRENs, and we find that NRENs, or distributed grades, they start as projects, and later on they become infrastructures on individual units. So where do we draw the line? But within the iMENTORS, what we've done is that we've treated projects as financial frameworks, and then we've also treated infrastructures as physical entities. So that's the distinction that we've done with our work. We've also tried to classify e-infrastructures within these frameworks. So for example, a supercomputer or a high-performance computer at Dar es Salaam Institute of Technology, is it an e-infrastructure? Is it different from the organization that hosts it? And what we've done is that we've, for example, made sure that we categorize it as a single unit within its own right, but also linked it with the hosting organization and linked it back to the project that funded it and to the donors that provided the finances. And the outcome of that is that we've built an online virtual database that connects all the organizations, all the projects, all the research infrastructures, and all the interested parties in individual entities within this single database that we call iMENTORS. So we have all stakeholders that have been involved in e-infrastructures in Africa within the past 5 years within this single one-stop shop, as Lewis called it. Now, we also have linked these entities to each other. So for example, if one clicks on the high-performance computing in Kwame Nkrumah University, one would be able to trace the donors and all the organizations that were involved in the implementation, and that we think is a useful feature, especially in trying to solve the problem that Lewis talked about of knowing who is doing what. The other thing is that our database, the iMENTORS database, is complex, but it also provides the details that one would need moving forward. For example, a researcher in South Africa would want to know who are doing similar jobs in his area, and they would be able to know who exactly is doing what they're interested in, and who are in the interested donors or the private companies that are interested in that area. So I think we have a resource that links all the players together. It's generic, but it's also standardized. What we mean is that we've come up with classifications that can be used, that can make sense to users of our database. And also, as I've mentioned, we are providing a platform so that future discussions can try and come up with well understood and standard meanings of words, for example, research infrastructures or e-infrastructures, as Simon Taylor described earlier on. I will stop there and hand over to Lewis to continue with the next slide.
So basically, yeah, so I mean, why is all this important? I mean, for us it's important basically because it's a first attempt to actually make a meaningful mapping of the infrastructure, of the infrastructure landscape based on ownership, not necessarily on, but as I referred before, on type or nature. It's important because this is how we can trace where the money goes, and this is where my point is. It's very easy to see through iMENTORS and throughout our project who gets the money right now. There are not many organizations in Africa that actually benefit from the money. And that's not to say that because it's unfair. It's just that some organizations, I mean, of course, it hinges a bit at what Leonardo mentioned before about ownership, about readiness, sorry. A lot of countries are less ready than others, so it kind of makes sense that research is at more advanced stage in certain cases, and so this is why also it's very effective to distribute the money where effective research takes place. But there's also some other thing. A lot of research that is taking place is unknown. A lot of people are not on the map. No one knows. So I think that there's a propension of entities who are just better at finding good collaborations with across the globe, and so can secure more money. And that's important. So it's important. iMENTORS is not just about donors. It's about scientists, and scientists should make use of it, because this is a way to increase collaboration. It's also a way to secure more money, and that's very important. iMENTORS is not just a tool for donors. For us, it's something that it's certainly not a one-off benchmarking exercise as it had happened in the past. We are very serious about iMENTORS. We're very involved, and we'll continue to provide this service to scientists, even though the project comes at its end. It's basically connect scientists with the resources needed to be able to continue and carry on research. So my final point is that we should essentially continue to talk about this, put people on the map, talk about it. People should be aware of it, people should be on there, people should talk between them. For donors have already used iMENTORS to maximize impact. I mean, CEDA, as part of its 2015-2016 strategy, has already used iMENTORS internally to be able to create more impact assessments for forming its policy development. And this, for us, is a huge success story. This is essentially what makes iMENTORS what it is. It enables, it's a project that's funded by the Commission and that provides advice to other donors for the ICT policies. And I think this is fantastic. This, for us, is enough to consider that at least we've achieved that bit. I think I'm done.
Okay. Thank you very much. You saved 36 seconds, so you did very well.